writer's track. I'm going to pull this door closed so we don't get all that external noise here. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. So some of you have just joined us this morning. You're here for Bring Your World Alive with two of the most amazing world builders of the history of both games and novels. I'm super excited that Bill Fawcett and Jody and I have chosen to be a part of GaryCon and be a part of this writer's track. You would have to pay a lot of money to be in front of these people. The fact that they're giving this time for free in these decades of incredible knowledge, we're super grateful for.
Luke made me.
Yes, he has that way, doesn't he? I am a fan of what not just what you guys have created, but what you continue to create for the community. And it's in genre fiction, in gaming, and all of that. And so it's going to be a little bit more open. I'm going to actually be going. I've got to get the young lady set up who's running my booth, and then I'll be coming back and joining them.
She also has almost 100 publications and over 100.
Just over 100, but that does include some of my children's books.
So she'll be joining us once her duties allow her to come back.
Exactly. I'll be hopping out and hopping back in. But we've got some good time with these amazing folks this morning. We got an hour and a half here, so it's gonna be a little bit more open discussion on really how to bring that world to life in your stories. And with that, I will turn it over to Bill and Jody and let them do their own introductions of themselves and their histories, and start to get you guys rolling on bringing your world alive.
Morning. Thank you all for joining us. It's a much larger crowd than we expected. So this is great. I have done my own worlds. I started out in role-play gaming. I was playing Dungeons and Dragons when I was 19 and continue to do so. Problem?
I'm sure they can hear.
Okay. The fan is going to drown everybody out, including me. And I have tinnitus, so when it's time for you to speak to us, speak up. That's going to drown you out.
We're all
Anyway.
not alone.
We worked with a lot of interesting people who worked in the game world, writing modules, designing games, writing short stories, writing books, creating worlds for other people, codifying worlds of other people's series, and so on. So I don't know where we want to go from there, except introduce yourself. When I was 19, I was dating the president of TSR, and he turned me over to my first ever publishing assignment. I was typing the manuscript for Gary Gygax for the Player's Guide to Monster Manual and DMG. So that was $1 a page. And I will say to you, as just sort of a parenthetical thing, never say no to a possible employment. Even if you don't know if you can do it right away, you'll learn. Don't say no to an opportunity. And from there, gaming took me to writing Choose Your Own Adventures for Tor Books, which took me to writing novels for Bain Books and Warner Books, and many short stories in between. So, your turn.
Oh, I can go. We're married.
Can't tell. Can't tell.
I'm Bill Fawcett. Built like the hills and been here about as long as they have. I go back almost about as long as her, when a bunch of us sat in a house and said, we're starting a magazine called Dragon. I did, for the first 45 issues, the centerfold, the various gaming needs, the first chosen path ever set in D&D, ElfQuest, it was called. I didn't know Richard when he'd done that. So I got to, for the first several years in the 70s, got the joy of being part of the creativity and the creation. Even got in the biggest trouble that anyone had had when I did the article on how to Slay and Kill Angels, which the fundies went after me tooth and nail. It was wonderful. We got great publicity. They're trying to figure out what else I could do. I refused to shoot with it. Anyhow, after that, I left to found a little company called Mayfair Games, run their Rolex line and be their chief board game designer. Created a lot of universes there. I went from that into writing and book packaging. Book packaging is I would create a universe, I would get a publisher to give me money to get writers to write in it, I would hire the writers, I would edit it, I would supervise it, and I'd turn it into the publisher to give.
Hire the artist.
No, they paid for the artist. I just had input on the covers. Publishers are very hinky about covers. Anyhow, so I've been, after that, I've done RPG software, run an RPG software company. I've done a lot of online things, working with that. I've also written about 14 fiction books and about a dozen nonfiction books, and one fiction book labeled nonfiction about UFOs and no ancient aliens. And at Gen Con 9, one of the guys on the TV, I won't mention his name, he's got blonde hair, or had blonde hair, first came up to me and said, I won't be here next year, something completely different. It's really weird, you're going to laugh at me, but it pays good. And he was one of the 5 ancient alien people that started writing the books for the show.
He had 2 kids to send to college, you can understand.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I assume maybe he's found more faith since then in the way he talks, but then who knows? All right. Since then, I've also written everything from no SF novels to mysteries to nonfiction books about history. So I've created a lot of worlds, and I've worked with over 600 writers on books I've packaged. So we've done a lot of worlds together. So, and I've had to judge a lot of worlds and edit them, because I've edited every one of those. I've edited several hundreds of books. So between them, hopefully I can give you a little of what you do not do. Now, it's sort of a workshop, so feel free to ask specifics about what you're working on and questions you might have on it. This doesn't have to be generic. It can be very specific to yours, and we'll all learn from what you're doing. Okay? So just feel free, and feel free to interrupt basically at any time. It's a conversation, not a monologue. Duologue?
Duologue. Yes, that is a word.
Thank you. One of us is much better at copy editing.
Among other things, all stories start in the middle. So unless you are writing the kind of story where you are writing about the creation of the universe from page 1, all stories begin with an established world of some kind. And people who are there, whatever they look like, or however many limbs they have, but they have a history. You're not almost never dealing with a newborn baby. And so they have experiences they have encountered. They live in a world, there are resources, there are never enough resources. Scarcity drives conflict, conflict makes stories. So when you're creating your world, there's not ever going to be enough of everything for everyone. So where do you limit that, and where do you start? And really a basic fundamental is you start with geography. What does your world look like? Is it a water world? Are people living under sea? Is it littoral? Do you live on the edge of a river or an ocean? What resources do they have that are purely physical, that are purely terrain? For everybody who's been a gamer, you've already figured out how to do maps.
As she said, only one bestseller I've ever gotten away with starting with creation. It's called the Bible. After that, you can't load them up. It's just like any book. How much of your research can you show? Who told you that?
Okay, my first editor, Brian Thompson of Sacred Memories,
Used to be a
Border
TSR for a
Books,
long time.
said, you may do a lot of research. You may come up with a backstory for everything in your world, but no more than 10% of that should appear on the page ever. The other 90% is you are writing from that knowledge. You are not writing it into the book, because that's boring. If you want to read a geography book, read a geography book. If you want to read a novel, these people are already living this. Let's see it through their eyes.
If you're doing a game, your player doesn't need to know the history of every shire it passes through. That will bog it down immeasurably. It will also use up pages you don't have and cost you money if you ever go print. What you need is the result, and if it's interesting enough, they'll ask you, or you'll find enough success to get a demand for a source book that tells you about the world of and the background in that. Even, take the classic City of the Invincible Overlord. It didn't tell about the establishment of the city. It didn't talk about the culture of the city. It talked about what you will encounter and how things will react to you. When you're creating your world, don't show off how brilliant you are. Show off how brilliant your characters will be to the players. It's a big step back and an important difference that many designers and writers fail to do, and I've had to step in and say no. In fact, one of the most common comments I have to authors, some of whom are very experienced and should know better, including a few New York Times bestsellers. No, that's not a prologue, that's not a chapter, it's gone. They don't need that background. They don't need that universe. And to be honest, I went back to something I wrote 5 years ago that I'm rewriting now, a fantasy novel. And I looked at the first chapter and I went, guilty, gone. 3,200 brilliant words, wonderful description, great background, has no direct effect on the characters and the rest of the book whatsoever. It just creates the world. And I went, really nice, maybe an afterword, can't slow the novel down. Can't slow the story down, can't bog the players down. They don't need to know who's a bastard and who isn't in the kingdom to go kill orcs. Okay, so keep that, yes.
I guess it kind of plays into the idea of the show, don't tell.
Yeah.
Yes.
You have to show your world through your character's interactions, not tell them about the world.
Right.
As an editor, I have a stamp for it. This is a tell, this is a tell, this is a tell, and I get another tell. Everywhere I mark tell, please show instead dialogue, action, description, anything that's saying the Count of Monte Cristo was a tall guy with a red beard who was thrown out and did this and ended up in a prison and got out and did this, found a treasure by sheer coincidence from someone in the prison, and the rest of the story is about him having fun getting revenge. Right? You don't need that in a paragraph. That's boring. And if you do that kind of thing in a game, your players will stop reading your game because they'll find that there's too much information and it's too confusing. That's different from giving clues or hints or warnings, which you should do in your game or your RPG.
Now, the importance of world building is for any writer, games, cartoons, movies, books, you name it, is continuity is your guide. You must do things in a consistent fashion or your reader will stop trusting you. If your world is chaos, that's your continuity. Things change, but you need to keep track of all of these things. But if you happen to have a spell book and the spell for invisibility works this way on page 8, it must work the same way on page 180, where you need to explain why. And all of these things are what you have worked out in advance, which is why world building is vital to a good book, a good game system. So that you have a basis, and then thereafter your game masters have a basis for telling a good story. And you don't get bogged down in things that, well, on Tuesdays under a full moon it's different. Well, okay, put that in your guidelines. Write that into what your characters know.
You can put a trick, a change, a mind blower in a game, or especially at the end of a module or something, or there, but you can't put it without setting it up. If you're going to have alter the fantasy and then it turns out that it's the result of a technology, or you're in a game, or you're in a computer sim and your mind was wiped, or you're on a spaceship and this is how they keep you from being insane on this 10-year journey, etc., by giving you terrain to be in, you've gotta give warning all through.
Foreshadowing.
Foreshadow. You've got to make every revelation a fair mystery. You've got to put a couple things in there that the reader goes,
That doesn't
okay.
fit.
So that when they read it, it's not a surprise. It's a good revelation. But it's not a, you just destroyed everything I read because now it no longer makes any sense. So that's one of the most common problems in continuity is have your ending, especially if you have a slight twist to it or a new character come in. And sometimes, very honestly, you end up doing it so you can end the damn book because it's gotten out of hand. I've had writers who just wrote themselves into holes, and we had to find a way to blow the whole hole up in order to get out of it and get the book done. And then but it's perfectly all right and very good idea to simply go back and add those into the rest of the manuscript for your game report.
You can go back and edit. You don't have to. The thing that you started is not the thing that you end, actually. So go back and rewrite the beginning. Go back and include sense words and descriptions and the foreshadowing that you should have put in along the way, but you hadn't thought of it then. Writing is a creative process, but what that means is it evolves. So you come up with something in chapter 40 and say, oh my gosh, that's great. I can put that in. Your subconscious is an incredibly clever tool. It will say, yes, this will work if you go back and add it to the earlier part of the story.
Now,
so give yourself that opportunity.
Yes, listen to your subconscious mind tell you. Writer's block is normally because you wrote yourself and you're doing something wrong and you need to go back and drop it, revise it, or add something to it. By the way, this is what I found working with this book.
So we talk about foreshadowing. I feel like every time I try to write in foreshadowing, I'm hitting my players or my readers in the head with a brick to try to, tell them something.
Okay.
How can I be more subtle or more?
Okay.
What kind of world have you got?
I do mostly like D&D campaigns and things like that. The biggest one that I've been writing recently is, the orcs in the north are coming south. They blew up a pass to try to stop the invasion. And when they did, they revealed like a castle that had been hidden in the avalanche. Revealed it, and they started exploring it and finding, magical artifacts and things like that. And I feel like every time I'm trying to tell the history and such, I'm just throwing a brick at their head. And
Okay, don't do that. Put hints. Put illustrations on the walls. Put objects. Have objects that are named, and the names tell you. And you don't have to tell them this is a foreshadow. You don't have to even do a whole line. It can be a painting of a guy dressed different.
Or somebody has a pendant that has come down to them through the generations. That is the image of the thing they're going to be looking for, but they don't know that. They just know that this is a family heirloom that they are supposed to keep forever.
In other words, what I think you're probably doing wrong is explaining that it's a foreshadow instead of just putting something that they probably won't even notice till they get to the end and then they do this. I'm not foreshadowing this thing, and this castle was, and you notice that in past times. No, just put clues of it instead of doing something solid and trust your readers or your players to find it. Does that help?
I think so.
Okay. Be careful when you throw in the cadiddle. When you throw in a change or a thing. You can ruin your entire series in the long run by putting the wrong thing in just to make some chapter more exciting or convenient. My favorite is one of the two terrible Star Trek movies where Scotty invents a way to transport onto a moving starship going at warp 5 halfway across the universe or something, several light years away, and he teleports people on. And I saw that in the movie and I went, that cutesy that the director threw in, because it wasn't in anything, just eliminated the entire need for Starfleet. We no longer need spaceships, and you can transport nuclear weapons into cities and set them off instantly. So he's ended civilization and no longer needs starships. So that little pediddle that he put in to be cute in that movie.
Who was that director? Abrams, I think.
J.J. Abrams.
Yeah, Abrams. Anything he touches turns to video game.
He thinks that everything that he does moves fast enough you won't notice.
And when I saw that, I turned the movie on. The first time I saw it.
But the trouble with having a new voice come into an established world, an established universe, is that if they don't know enough about the background, they can completely upset the world building that existed before. Just like anything that you've seen that goes into a new generation, goes into a new iteration, suddenly they introduce a character who did not exist before, that no one ever referred to before, and yet they were supposed to have been part of it from the beginning. And it would completely upset the structure. Don't do that to yourself. You can watch it happen in real time with millions of dollars being spent on destroying something that you love from childhood. Don't do it in your own work. Go back and reread your work before you introduce something new.
Or like when they have a cataclysm of some kind that completely erases all the canon and lore. Stuff like
Yeah.
stuff like
Or you wake up in the shower and it's all 2 seasons of Dream, which costs them about 20% of the viewership the next episode. And it faded from there. Dallas never survived that.
I remember that.
Everybody was
Oh,
mad. If you're going to keep going, you can't do that, basically. But, so, enough. So, a Pinito, a twist, a MacGuffin is fun, and it works, but you have to look at both foreshadowing it and the long-term implications of it to make something very different in your world. This is why, like C.J. Jeri wrote the Games of Israel series. She had a whole bunch of very different ideas about this fantasy universe that Morgan should run for her character, but they didn't all fit with each other. So she has them going through these gates that moves her from universe to universe on each one, and instead of people traveling geographically, they travel through the universes. And that's how she got around it. I pointed out that out to her, and she said, yeah, I know it was lazy build, but it's the only way to fill the contract, and they were paying me a lot of money.
And sometimes you're just running out of time, and you don't have time to go back and look at something. It happened to me recently.
She did 1632.
Yeah, 1632, Eric Flint's alternate timeline of a small town in West Virginia. If you've never read these books, they're pretty good. A town from West Virginia picked up and set down into 17th century Germany during the 100 Years' War. And believe me, the Americans have a lot more impact on Thuringia than it had on them.
3,500 people.
Yeah, and 600 writers, 37 books, 38 now that Walters is off, hundreds of short stories later. The universe is still going strong because Eric had his hand in everything. He had his finger on the pulse, he had all of those things prepared, he was ready for it, he stopped people from doing things that did not work within the universe.
Okay.
Normally you have to do that yourself.
Right, so taking a step back now, what makes a universe work? What makes it appealing? Now, there's a couple of things. And the worst examples are things like Eberron, because G&D carries it. Not that they're not brilliant works, but if it's that popular, if it's Wizards or TSR, you can just put a good, interesting world in it, and it'll be strong. And it was. And from the beginning, we were having fun, and we were all creating these. I was DMing off of mimeograph sheets at one point, before the box came out. And I was playing against mimeograph sheets and DMing from the box. And anything you did was exciting. Blackmore is interesting, but not innovative in a swamp with stuff in it. But it was for the time. So what I'm saying is, take a step back and ask, what will be entertaining, exciting, or challenging to the person doing this or reading the specific thing you have? How many cliches, standard concepts can you put in? We all make use of them. Magic spells have a cost. Take energy, something, all sorts of different things that have become standards that you don't have to explain, like warp drive and phasers and the cheats that they put in, like beaming up and down. Which, by the way, if you read the background and you catch it real carefully, Star Trek found that and the holodeck on an advanced alien ship. That's all they were able to understand off of it, and that's how they got it. Why they got it is because Gene was telling us one time that after the first episode, the people at Desilu said, "You're spending too much time going up and down in the shuttle. You've got to find a better way to move the story ahead in the amount of time you have."
Well, since most of their screenwriters were also actual science fiction writers, they said, we can do this.
And the teleportation beaming came in the second episode, the first of the series episode. That was our solution they presented, along with the onerous response they had to the other comment that was made. Look, this is way too far out. Get rid of the guy with 20 years and no female first officer. Well, interestingly enough, he fought for Spock, and even though he was dating Majel, the first officer, and eventually married her, there's another story.
There's another story.
Yeah, because he had a choice.
Catch us later.
Let me do it a second. And he did change the first officer to, actually they just dropped the existence of the first officer on this, because I think Major would have killed him if he replaced her with a man. But by the way, Michelle Nichols and Major were both dating Dean at the same time. And halfway through the first season, she was playing Ensign Major. What was it? Yeoman Rand. They took him aside on the set. He told us about it. He said, and they told me I had to pick.
Choose one of us.
Couldn't keep dating and sleeping with both of them.
Because they were friends.
They were close friends at this point, and he chose Major. So put that one in your plot, in your background.
That would make some fun. The other parts of world building for games or for literature, the important thing is please your audience. Wish fulfillment. Something in your world that just fulfills a yen that we all have. Perhaps your world is about people learning to fly or to teleport or to gain riches, whatever these things are. You are doing this for the sake of your readers, to give them escapism and to find something in their world that they don't have in the one that they live in. Like, do you want to ride dragons? Put that in your game, in your book. Do you want to have a whole herd of unicorns? Put that in your book. These things are to please your reader, and no story with Dragon Riders is going to be like any other story with Dragon Riders, although the inevitable comparisons will be made. It doesn't matter, because your story will never be like anyone else's story.
When you're looking at this, look at what, take back from, stop thinking about what your readers like in fantasy, what they like to read in literature, and think about what their life and world is like. I'll give you a good historical example. When D&D first came out, things, you had copper pieces meant something. Things sold for copper pieces. Things sold for silver pieces. A platinum was an adventurous reward. I mean, that was 6 months comfortable living in a castle for a character. Well, because we were all broke and starving, there was a massive inflation in wealth and items that occurred quickly because we couldn't make any money in the real world at first. TSR's first 2 years were a struggle. I wasn't part of that team, but I was just as broke up in Milwaukee as they were down in Lake Geneva. And gold pieces became more common, and wealth became more common. In fact, for a while there, during the late 70s, when there was a mild depression, we had a massive inflation of gold and costs, and it had to be reined in the next edition. and a whole list of costs and values went in there and how much you pay for it. And a magic sword went from 5 gold pieces plus 1 sword to 250 to 750. Just because the inflation, because the players wanted to succeed and make wealth, because you couldn't always do it in real life. Most of us were pretty young and couldn't do it in real life. Yeah, we hadn't made our net yet. And Gary, by the way, was when D&D came out, Gary was selling insurance during the day and copying shoes in his basement at night to make enough to raise his wife and kids, marrying the kids. So getting wealthy in the game was satisfying. If there's a play going on, think about immortality as a goal or immunity, and players will react to it.
Overcrowding. Suddenly you have an estate with many acres around you. One of the reasons that the picture of angels came to be people in long white gowns playing harps is because peasants never had white clothing. You couldn't keep it clean for one thing, and you didn't have the money or the resources to bleach your clothes clean, white. And sitting around playing an instrument, especially one as delicate as a harp, you didn't have that kind of pleasure. You were still working, you were nursing a baby and stirring the pot, cleaning the house, pulling weeds, chasing away predatory animals and so on. That kind of pleasure obviously had to be heaven because it was nothing like your life. So that was your reward for later, for living a good life and working hard.
What I love about what you're saying is you're describing how the investment in the human condition that we want to experience in our books and in our games. And I think as a society, just the amount of commercialism and materialism and the pace at which we live, like things don't have value and meaning in that same way. And while in the early days of TSR, you know, when it was like, it's like you could still kind of like, ooh, that's, you know, we want to have the gold, you know, the gold inflation process occurs. But I almost feel like it's almost, you want to go back to the roots and get into that again, where in your stories, how do you show that meaning of value and that meaning of things having worth and time having worth and pleasure having worth, you know, like being able to actually like create that feeling in your world, create that scarcity of the thing that you want your characters to want, and therefore your readers are going to be invested with that human condition.
Yeah, we mentioned that there's never enough of everything to go around. So you strive for the thing that you need to have.
And often that's that what you need to create magic, or that what you need to just eat. It depends on your world. Geography. You mentioned geography and you reverted off of that. It's got to be consistent with what people understand as geography in our world. Everything's about people. Even alien books tend to be about people, and unless you're Al Clement, Aristotle is writing totally alien creatures in a totally alien environment, which as a physicist and chemist and professor, he can do. Stick with good consistency. Something I recommend when I'm working with writers is to go to the library and get a junior high geography test. It has everything in it you need, and you can read it in 3 hours. And it'll tell you why there's a desert on the backside of mountains. Because moisture goes up, falls on the mountain, and it's dry afterwards. Or why the Sahara dried out only 8,000, 6,000 years ago. About 6,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, the Sahara was a plush lake and river-filled area growing with animals. And the weather stream changed with the end of the Ice Age. And effectively, the equivalent of Gulf Stream went away, and the moisture stopped coming, and it started to dry, and the drying fed on itself. And now we have the Sahara Desert covering a third of Africa, and it drove all the people living there onto the Nile River and forced them to evolve a civilization in order to survive in the density and was in the narrow area.
Now, that tells you something about how your countries will come to be. Unless your characters can fly, and that changes everything. It's just like magic, it changes everything. Mountains make a very good border. Rivers make a border, oceans make a border. If you have two countries living side by side on a plane, pretty soon there's going to be one country.
Yes, only.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, so when you start to talk about a kingdom, how far back does it go? How far back does your realm exist, and for what reason? And it's usually geography for people who communicate and interact on foot. Yeah.
I have a question about that actually. It's something I struggle with on the world that I'm doing for my gaming. Because I want there to be, the current races are dealing with the changes that have been wrought in earlier times. That's the theme and the setting for the world. And I want those earlier times to be close enough to be in living memory of some of the longer lived races. But I don't want forward progress. And, it has to be arrested at that sort of fantasy European
All
medieval
stories
setting.
begin where something changes. So maybe the point for you is to say the change has happened here and now, and it's not going to be the way that it was anymore. It's this way now, and work your explanation for it into it so it will not continue to go forward. This is the way it's going to be. Maybe there was a cataclysm of some kind, driving the population together or apart.
A mental image you might want to use is arcs, story arcs. You have a big story arc that they're in the middle of it, they're not going to change. You've also got lots of little story arcs for your characters. Why do I say that is important in creating an interesting world? Because any interesting story is one of a change. Something is different at the end of even a short story. It may be just an attitude change, it may be a situational change for an individual. Something is stopped from being evil and occurring, very common theme for us, but it's a little change. And you can do multiple arcs. That's basically what modules are, story arcs with goals at the end. And if you think of it as a series of internal continuities that don't have to supplement or change the big arc, they're just in it, but they can't change it either. They can't interfere with it, and you know what your big arc is. You'll have a much more appealing and continuous universe because the stories will be like the stories you enjoy, where the hero does something or fails at something or changes or evolves or gets so much done and sets up the sequel, which is what you want to do in your world.
Well, in those arcs, so you've got we'll go Harry Potter. We got the Harry Potter wand lore is basically the whole overall arc. But each one has its own, each story has its arc, and then they're hooking. That, it's not like arc ends, new arc begins. No, you hook that other arc just before that first arc ends, so that they're like, oh, shoot, now we're dealing with two things. Oh, thank goodness, I have some relief. But now I have to finish the other thing. And so it's not like 1, 2. It's like 1 and 2, and now 1 finishes, and 2 and 3 starts, and 2 finishes, and it continues on in that way.
For all that we can comment about J.K. Rowling herself, she created a compelling world full of loyalty and good friendship and evolution. But she did the most important thing any storyteller does. She fulfilled the promise she made at the beginning, at the end of the arc. For anybody here, sorry, spoilers. At the beginning of the arc, the attack on Harry's family by Voldemort, he who shall not be named, tough luck, is fulfilled at the end. She did that. She also, by the way, made $1 billion on books, something no other writer had ever done before her. So, believe me, I applaud her for that. She fulfilled the promise. And yes, all of these things are intertwined. The horrible situation with his family. Yep. Actually, it's up to here where it almost looks like Harry is going to have a happy family. And decline begins after that.
So
And
the uncle.
all of the story arcs are tied together. And if you are writing a coherent series, that is important. You need to know where you're going. And that's world building. Segueing maybe back to our topic of creating that world and understanding where you're going. J. Michael Straczynski had the whole idea for Babylon 5 in his mind for all 5 years, which apparently he kept in a bank vault. But he knew where the whole thing was going to go. Unfortunately, it was Warner Brothers, I think, who did not cooperate with him and booted him after 3 years. Had to finish it, I swear.
And you
Yeah,
can tell
he
it's
did,
season
yeah,
5.
and they did finish it. And by the way, the first person he hired was Londo, Peter Jurassic, because he was the main character. If you read the whole arc, it's Londo's story.
3 mistakes, 3
He made
questionable, 3 choices Londo made to drive the whole thing.
Peter was telling us all about him. He did some books with him, and he was telling us all, and he was hired, and he and several of the other characters got a piece of the series, by the way. He never had to work again if he didn't want to.
One of the things that you talk about him having that whole story, kind of the world built, kept in a big vault. The other thing that if you do your world build first and doing all of those pieces, what are my character arcs? What is my geography? What is the catalyst, the inciting event in each book, as well as the overall one. If you do all of that, like kind of build out ahead, when you sit down to write, those words come so much faster, so much faster. It's like I'm a little bit renowned for my word speed, but in general, I'm around the same level as most full-time working writers, because what I do is I might spend weeks at a time before I'm not doing any writing. Some writers are saying write every day, and if that's what works for you, kudos, that's awesome. For me, I will sometimes not write for several weeks, but then I know exactly what I'm going to write, and then I'm going to write at lightning fire pace for a week, and write as much as people who maybe were just let me think a little bit about this and write a little bit more. And think about it. No, have that. For me, what works is to have that world built out, to have that, know where my characters are going, know what my world is going to look like, know how the world is changing, and how those changes in the world are going to affect the characters.
I know the beginning, I know the end, and I puddle out every day.
Well, and they both get there in the same way. So that's why I was like, whichever way works for you. But I am like a little bit of an addictive plotter.
Now, one of the things that you can use to make your world more, your creation, your world more appealing, particularly in a gaming world, and you're always going to do this in a book, is the second act ending situation. There should be times when it looks almost hopeless, either in your world or wherever, where if the players are moving through things and you really want to make it interesting, give them something that you're set up a way for them to succeed at, but it looks like the Viking invasion is going to work. And unless they find but they will find the right object in the castle to get to the kings, kill him, and they turn around to go have an election. Oh wait, that was the Mongols. Anyhow, you can not only make your world interesting, you can make it where it increases in difficulty to where the players feel that they are accomplishing more. In your case of your readers, of course, it ups the suspense. And that's why they have a second act with a cliffhanger ending before 8 minutes of commercials. Because they want you to know, this guy aims the gun at the hero, and then they cut the commercial. Well, you can do that in your stories. You can leave, when they find a quest, they discover something horrible, or they discover most of something horrible has already happened and they've got to act. And then the next quest is to give them the means to solve that and deal with it when everything is in a nadir. And then it's a real great high for the players. And a lot of people miss that. They have pretty consistent suspense levels all the way through. If you increase the suspense level, drop it, and then increase it again, and drop it and then give them a happy ending or at least a comfortable ending.
Or at least an appropriate ending.
Yeah, which RPGs do all the time when you reach a certain level and you get all these rewards and you do skip and everything and you look really tough. Many
One of the purposes of what he's talking about is the near failure or failure earlier in the story, is to give your main character or your team something that they can learn from that will help them later to solve a big problem. Because you actually have one aim, book, short story, or anything else, to which they are ascending. They are moving towards it. There's always going to be rising tension, release of tension, rising tension, release of tension, because the human body, the human mind can only take so much. And you have to relieve that.
And if you don't, you're setting a tone for your book. So, like, have you ever watched a movie where it's just dark? Like, the whole movie's in the dark. And you are leaving the people who are viewing that, you know, and you as a viewer of that tension is there the whole time. And then when you get that one scene where it's like daybreak and they step out, it's the sunlight, your viewers go, now I can step back a little bit. I'm ready. I'm ready to continue with the rest of this viewing. And that's what we're doing with the rising tension and releasing tension in your book. Think of like you're in darkness and that can be like a metaphoric darkness, like the hopelessness. You know, what are you going to give them to go, I can keep going? You have to give them some kind of a spark, some kind of hope that, oh, okay, we can do this and push forward.
Not just necessarily hope, but any kind of release.
Yes.
F. Paul Wilson's The Key. Read the book? Saw the movie? Okay. A demon occupies an old keep, an old castle. Excuse me? Well, okay.
old stuff.
Yeah. Where a lot of Nazis have brought prisoners for torture and information, just because they're rotten people altogether. And throughout the course of this, the creature haunting the walls is watching them. Now, monsters, interesting monsters, are intelligent, and this one is very intelligent. One of the prisoners of the Nazis is a rabbi, and he's being kept in a very small, former monk cell. Obviously, just because the Nazis hated Jews, they were going to treat this man as badly as possible. Now, mind you, this is like 10 little Indians. They are falling one after another because the demon has decided that he doesn't like them. He's going to play with them.
And he wants this rabbi to explain what's going on because he's a historian of the area.
So, at one point, it swoops through the wall. Now, mind you, the murderers torture have been going on for the entire book up until this point. And this creature swoops through the walls, and the rabbi sort of looks around. There's a crucifix on the wall, and for whatever reason, you know, he grabs it and thrusts it at the monster.
No, swing at.
Yes, and chooses to recoil from the crucifix, and then flees through the wall again, leaving the rabbi with an absolute crisis of religious conscience.
And in the monster's head. And he's going, I didn't have to do that, but that was fun.
And it makes the reader laugh. It makes the viewer laugh. It was in the movie too.
Yeah,
And it releases the hideous tension that has been building up, so Wilson could start all over again, making your whole body tense.
It is okay mid-game, mid-book, to have a failure. I have consistently had success with having the whole party chased out, but on the way out they grab the object that will cause success in the last section of it. You don't know what it is, but you stuff it in your thing. It's an interesting gem, it's a cube, whatever, and you just know you shouldn't get rid of it. And no one ever offers them anything for it. And at the end, you get that. You do it. You can also reward players at the end by having them discover they're better than they thought they were. That they're more important than they thought they were. That someone's been helping them on the side. It's a great cadiddle for cheating. Because they are. Back in the 80s, I did a lot of scripting for a series called Worlds of Z from New World Computing. And the whole object of the 7 games we got out was you were searching through this universe to find the great old ones who will stop the evil gods that are about to come. And as you go through, of course, your characters build. And we went broke before the last game. The guy got into motorsports and race cars.
Okay.
Destroyed the company. But the whole excitement at the end was that when you get there and you see the statues of the great ones after 8 22-hour games, it was you. You build up to the point where you're the heroes that can stop the evil gods. Your final battle is to stop the evil gods. And you win. And that's the end of the series. So you can promote the players after putting them in a low point. And it really can excite enthusiasm in the game as they become better. And one of the ways you can do it is having NPCs reacting to them and have that change as time goes on. From disregard to disdain to near hero worship at the end, where the king thinks they're the rest of them.
Wish fulfillment. Wish fulfillment. You make the reader happy by your characters are the analog for people reading the story, playing the game. Give them something that's a huge reward that would be fabulous in the real world, but it's good enough between the pages of a book or within the confines of the game.
And it's through those characters. I probably talked about this one before I was with you. That's how your readers are seeing their world. Also, is through those characters. So, as you have different characters in different parts of your world, your physical world, what they think and feel, and it should even come across in the words like that are they're saying their own internal thoughts. Like, so if you're in a region that is just like rocky and mountainous, and your character is somebody who doesn't like that, who wants water. I remember this time I pointed out that it was a bucket list place. I wanted to go to Bryce Canyon. I have been on water most of my entire life. Like, that's just, I've always been in places that have water. Water is my inspiration. You will find water in almost all of my stories, right? So I went to Bryce Canyon, middle of Utah. I should have definitely gone north to Zion a little bit because I literally felt claustrophobic all week long because I was like, where is the water? And I hated it. And it was, I know that I was in front of this beautiful thing, but I was tense and I was very unhappy even seeing this thing that should have been just absolutely breathtaking. If I'm the character writing that, my reader is going to like not see this beauty in this beautiful, majestic part of the world. Meanwhile, if I'm writing somebody who that's home to them, the gold and the way that the uniqueness of how the architecture of the stone there, that's Mother Nature's architecture. I mean, you could write that through somebody who's like moved by that, filled by that, or you could write that by sitting through somebody who is like, this place sucks. Get me out of here. Get me back to the shore. And so your characters are going to, your readers are going to feel about the world differently based on the characters that you're choosing to show different parts of the world to. And then you can also end up, that's where you can play into some of that reversal, where maybe you hate this land, right? You know, you're writing it through me. This is awful. There's no water. This is terrible. But then you meet this other character and you learn about the love and you learn about the history and you learn about the meaning of this place. And all of a sudden your reader goes, oh, everything I thought might not be the same. And then you kind of get a little bit of a reversal. And you can do that with each element of your world.
A strong example of that is Conan. Barbarian disdained civilization, massively disdained it, ended up king of the most civilized nation there, from Samaria, barbarian wilderness, to a rich, sophisticated nation with him as king because he had that extra element they needed that they hadn't had, a vicious king. And his view of it changes to where he's willing by book 6 or 7 of that series, when he's become king, Conan the King, I think it's called, to sacrifice himself to save this civilization, which 6 books earlier he would have gladly pillaged on a casual basis. So you can evolve in it.
World building is tied in with character development. All of these things are facets of one another. And your characters will change in some way. But this is, again, something that you plan, that you lay the groundwork for it to be possible. And your reader will feel that if you have not laid the groundwork, if you have someone make a revelation and change out of nowhere and say, where did that come from?
And you'll lose them. Now, a lot of people don't do this, especially in games. But it's okay to have a continuing NPC, a merchant who appears occasionally, someone who's a minister for the king who's really with their secret police and is helping you to accomplish things that will help the kingdom, something like that. You can bring back a character, and by their reaction to you and by how you can show changes in what's going on. When they at first treat you like a peasant who throws shekels at you, and at the end they arrange a meeting with the Grand Duke so that he can ask you to accomplish this one last task. You can up the interest in it by using NPCs to show the player's development, or in your book, NPCs to show how things grow. In the 1632 series, the way that the political powers, the historical figures, treat the characters from the town as their influence grows completely changes in the first 4 books as they introduce technology and knowledge and social changes. And
Sanitation, inoculations.
the automatic weapons in the 17th century. And so you've got that this allows the reader to see the characters change as they go into their role without being in the character's head. Half the book is not in the characters that are the most important head. And that's the way you can do it in both your games and in your books, is have your NPCs show something of the character.
Yeah, but then those NPCs can almost, they can have their own arc. Like that character can really change as well, and you can actually all of a sudden, this character in the book, it's a side character, you know, as opposed to like calling it an NPC, you might think that this isn't like just like a throwaway. They're just kind of in there, they're scattered, and then all of a sudden, they might become important. And when you're doing series writing, that's really fun because you might have, people are apart. I know we keep talking about characters and this is world building, but that's how we experience the world is through the people. And so if you have this side character who like you've only been playing with, but your adventure, your storyline, your plot is naturally going a certain direction, you might, as a writer, as much as I'm like a dedicated plotter, you know, they catch me off guard sometimes, and I'll get to a spot and I'm like, oh, I have no way for this to happen, but oh my gosh, yes I do. There's this side character who really wasn't that important, but they're the right person for this because I've taken that time to either as an NPC in a game, build them out and dribble them in here and there, or in a book series, you know, have them like appear and have these minor things, and you get to know them. You get to know them over time, and it sometimes will make more sense in a moment that is some kind of a pivotal moment to, instead of like, I'm going to introduce this new thing right here, you know, to take this thing that, oh gosh, your readers or your players, they go, that makes so much sense. I'm so glad for, you know, Joe Bob getting his moment here, you know, and it's fun to be able to like pull them through, like they pull your characters through, but your characters are also pulling them through the world as well.
And everything needs to tie together at the end. So what your character has discovered that's really cruel, that couldn't have been brought in any other way, leads to attack the enemy.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. First of all, I'm a fun example of that. I needed to have a character, I needed to kill off the evil politician president who was selling out his nation to have the general take over and be the hero of his country and popularly claim dictator, etc. Because it's easier to write about dictators.
You're writing back in nonfiction again?
Yeah. And yeah, all the politicians are evil, all the generals are pure heart. No, they already got rid of the generals. But I couldn't have the hero kill him, and I couldn't figure out what to do for a while, and then I realized that the president had sent an assassin to kill him because the general was getting too popular. Not uncommon. One of the greatest generals of Byzantine history was blinded and crippled by a jealous emperor after he conquered Italy and half of Western Europe for him. Anyhow, I had the assassin convert, decide he liked what the hero was doing instead, walked up and said, you know, you need a bodyguard. Your security sucks. I got right to you. Became his devotee, and he went out and reported back to the president and encouraged me to kill him so I didn't have to have my hero do it. Well, you can have characters manipulate NPCs. Now, the next level on that is we all talk about violence, we have we have action, we have adventure. You know, there's other things in life that you can throw just a little in to give it depth. How about the barmaid who has a crush on one of your characters and acts like it? You can put it in your role-play game, you can put it in your book. She never really does much about it, but he remembers Matilda wonderfully, and you know, maybe a great night, maybe not, depending on the culture. But you can add depth. You can show your character would react to someone caring about it. And you can have your NPCs feel more valuable if someone cares about them a little bit. So add a little depth, which leads to the main depth of anything, because the most important part of any story isn't the heroes anyhow, it's the villains.
Everyone remember, was it Wizards and Warriors, the TV show? Nobody got interested in the prince after a time. He was boring. He was dull because he was good. And he did everything that he was expected to do. His sidekick, Marco, was a lot more fun, but it was the villain that everybody got into, because he got to do all the bad white things, and it was interesting. When you are creating a character, please do not make them boring. I know that it sounds like a truism. It sounds very, very easy. But when you have someone who does everything that he is expected to do and never does anything else, he is a robot. He has no vulnerability, so he has no points of interest for your reader to want to live through. You need someone with flaws and vulnerabilities and something that they need to accomplish. And your world building will play upon that. Where is the proper place in your world? Where do they belong? And for the villains, it's, well, at the top. Do they belong there? Are they going to have a change of heart or a change of mind? Say, I was not thinking of this in a way, and I can get much more influence by being the benevolent dictator. No, you don't like it. You work through it so that they become real people. And real people have vulnerabilities. Real people are impacted upon by their environment.
And real villains that are real people are a lot more fun to have your characters defeat.
Yes, that's it.
And it's got to have a real villain. You can't just have monsters all over and make a good module. You need to really make your world interesting. It needs points of darkness to overcome, big centers of darkness to overcome. They can have lots of minions, but somebody's supplying the food for all those critters in that concentrated area. Say that castle that opened up full of critters and damage and everything else. What are they eating?
Who was talking yesterday about Ellie Larson?
I think that was in the one that you guys did.
Yeah,
I was not in.
one of the people.
Oh yes, yeah, in the.
We have in science fiction and fantasy a writer named L.E. Modesett, Modesett. He is an economist. Unlike every other world out there, his economy structure works because he knows where the resources come from. Yes, it's 25 or 27 book series. He knows where the food comes from. He knows how the waste goes up. He knows where resources come from. He knows who works for what, how much their wages are, and so on. That kind of world building is a lot of work. But his world is so coherent because he knows all of these things. He has put them in place. He understands the system of government. And it means that he can write a long-running series because there's always a point within his world that he can pick up on and go with because the groundwork is already there. Everything has been set in motion. And you know from that point who has a vulnerability that could be exploited, who can try to upset the balance of things by acting, and find another cool storyline to follow based upon the world that you have created. It's not just, it's this tiny framework around the one story you want to tell, it's everything.
It's like the anchor point. So, the series Lost, which I know, I realized like season 1 was up here and it went like this, but we won't get into that one. But yeah, it did. But they did have like a cool story element was, when they had the season when what was the character, the sailor who was there separate.
So it said, spoiler alert, careers if you don't want to hear it. All of these people are dead.
Yeah.
And then there were footnotes in the last sentence.
It was weird, but there was forgive me that I don't remember the character's name, but he was the the Scottish Navy guy who was abandoned there, and they said, look, you have to have your anchor point. What's your anchor point that's going to remember and that you can always go from that point? And so in your stories, you need to, like, this is, you're talking about the Economist, this is like, there are some natural, like, this is fact, this is real. So what are the facts, the real about your world? What is the physics of your world, the economy of your world, the history of your world? I think a lot of times when people think world building, they're thinking, just what is my terrain? And what are my plants? And what are my animals? And that's very important as far as, like, as people are encountering the world in an adventure. As you're playing it around the table, I need to know what path through the physical world they're walking. But more importantly is if they're going to run into a certain faction or a certain beast or a certain villain, where's the history behind that? Why does it matter that they're running into this villain in this place? Well, why? Because this villain in this place now has a different kind of power because maybe he has comrades in this place that are possibly going to back him up. In your RPG, those are going to be like the minor minions versus the big boss. And in your story, it's going to be others that are going to derail your characters as they're trying to accomplish their ultimate objectives. There's just, as Bill was saying earlier, you got to keep going deeper and deeper. You're not necessarily going to tell your reader everything that you've gone super deep on, but it has to be there, and there have to be drop-ins that people understand why each of the moments that occur in your story are important in the way that they are important.
Now, this is not to say you have to make a lovable or a nice villain. No. Joseph Stalin, used by his parents, both of them physically, cast out at the age of 10 to be an apprentice to a cruel master in what was effectively a child labor factory, treated abominably, trusted no one, was betrayed several times in his lifetime, became a paranoid, vicious, cruel, very competent leader, and killed millions casually. You can know why they're there, and he's an interesting villain. That doesn't make him anything but evil. So you can have a villain who is evil, and you can show it in many ways, from the absolute, of course, total cliche. Just have him kill a cat in the first paragraph. Readers will hate him forever. On to having him a very troubled soul who makes all the wrong decisions. Londo is a villain. But nobody knows it. until you realize he doomed his world to occupation by the dark creatures, by the decisions he made. He sold out his planet.
And then there's sometimes that backstory can lead into an opportunity to give your villain a redemption arc. And that redemption arc doesn't have to mean that your villain turns around and is good and is now a good part of the story. It can be the end of them. Like Doc Ock in Spider-Man 2, the original trilogy, which will still be the one that always has my heart. But the way that he turns around in the end, and it's too late. He can't really be redeemed in the world. It's like he did too much, but he can be redeemed in his soul. So you can have that happen, or you can have a character, a villain, who does have that opportunity in the story to redeem and chooses to continue killing the cat.
I submit that there is a difference between a hero and an anti-hero and a villain. I think Londo is an anti-hero.
I would agree with you.
Well, Londo is a very flawed individual.
He is very flawed.
But he
It
gets
was so interesting that you wanted to follow him. That is the mark of a real protagonist, is you want to follow them whether or not they are nice. I have a story in an anthology called If I Were an Evil Overlord. And if you have never read the Evil Overlord list, look it up online. It's such things as, if I were an evil overlord, I would marry the princess immediately in a private ceremony, and never mind this great big setup for it. If I were an evil overlord, and this is the one that my story was based on, my ventilation ducts would be too small to crawl through.
never monologue.
Never monologue. Don't explain the problems or how you plan to conquer the world to the hero, just kill him. And so on and so forth. But I wanted to bring up another important part of world building that we haven't really touched on, is these soft things, not geography, not poverty, not scarcity, is religion and culture. Because somebody who has all the opportunity in the world to do something that could help his fellows or to accomplish his goals can't, because he has been raised in a culture or a religion or some other strictures that are psychological, and he can't do it. Or she has always been told, I must not go to this place because it is evil, and to discover that it isn't evil after all, it is just different, is something that she needs to accomplish, that she needs to incorporate into her worldview. And that is an alteration that the reader needs to understand. So you need to have laid just as much groundwork in that. Maybe there are religious factions, maybe there are cultural differences, a population moving in upon an already existing population in an area and having different cultures. Having that culture clash would be very, very interesting.
But that culture and that it's formed by the world, and we've talked about this, like everything is interrelated, because if you have a culture of peoples who are living in the trees, they may be, they might have a religion that really honors nature. They might have like philosophical beliefs that's honoring of nature. They, the way that they dress might be different. It might be they're in shades. It might be cooler. So they might have heavier clothing, and that becomes part of like their traditions and whatnot. If they're by the water, they might be, our foods, which are part of our culture, where they're eating more seafood versus the people in the forest. Like, so where they are in the world is going to affect, like, how they are. And a lot of times I've seen characters like adventures, like you're in a world, and let's say you've got a desert planet or whatever, and you're creating these characters that have skills that wouldn't make sense on a desert planet. Like, okay, there are things that you should have as a part of who you are as a culture because you're on a desert planet. Like, it's
No one
there's
on
interplay.
Dune should swim.
So I think all of that stuff, like it's interplayed. It's like they work together. It's like where they are, who they are, their history. Like it's all one.
Okay, a couple of danger spots on that. Playing with Christianity. You can do a wonderful job of it if you know a lot about it and you're consistent, you know, and you're careful, done well, such as Catherine versus Jeri series, you will actually have bringing people into more interest in Christianity.
C.S. Lewis.
C.S.
The
Lewis.
Chronicles of Narnia.
Right. Well, not as well done, in my opinion.
Not as heavy-handed.
No,
A terrible
I will
movie.
give you that.
And a
Definitely.
terrible movie. But anyhow, you can bring in older religions, you can bring in other faiths, you can bring in active gods. There's lots of room. Your God, generally, if there's a presence, has Superman complex problems. If your God's telling you to do something, the first question is, why the heck don't you just change this world to fit that instead? Why are you sending me, or are you that weak of God? Which is what Conan decides about his God at one point. You're so weak, you've got me doing all this? And why am I praying to you? Screw you. He actually says it in the book. It's famous in those words.
Most gods in cultures, Norse gods, Greek gods, Chinese gods, are spoiled children. We are always placating them, or as Terry Pratchett said, bargaining with thunderstorms. When you interact with a deity that supposedly created you or some other facet of your world, they demand homage, they demand sacrifices. Are they worth it? What are the perils for not cooperating with them? It's almost like any other monster, which is why you should not write about modern day religions unless you are willing to deal with the fallout. You can write anything you want as long as you can deal with the opprobrium or the online dissing or the doxing or anything else that comes your way.
Or the limiting that it will create in your career and books.
And as
Distribution.
actually Jody Lynn said this last night at one of our other panels, if that's not your religion, have somebody who it is their religion kind of help you to make sure that you're representing that appropriately. And that actually goes
long cliche.
Yeah. So that's definitely that we were talking about that with beta readers and having sensitivity readers that can help with that.
Everybody cringes when you say sensitivity reader,
I know.
but I wish there was a better way to express it. But to have somebody read your work and say, no, this would never happen because, no, we don't say this.
We use cultural experts.
Right, cultural expert is good. To have someone say, but you could do this instead. We have a friend, Kevin Grazier, who is a scientific consultant for Hollywood. In fact, he has two great books called Hollywood Science, which I heartily recommend. He worked on Eureka, he worked on Battlestar Galactica. I don't know exactly what he's doing at the moment. He also teaches college. But people working on Battlestar Galactica or Eureka would come to him and say, we want to do this. And he would say, you can't do this because this, but we can do it this way because it sounds like a really cool idea. Your cultural expert can say, you can't do this because this is a very strict thing, or this is sacrilege, or this is just plain insulting. However, here is something that you won't have ever thought about because you are not a member of our culture, and this you can include. And it makes your work so much more rich for having that kind of input from an expert, from someone who lives the life.
One of the great assets for either a widespread campaign or a book is to create the equivalent of Romany, gypsies. Because they have a communications network, they have a transferable culture that will be different from all the other cultures your characters walk through. It's a touch point that they can go to that can be used. And Romany, by the way, were often used as spies by various European powers all through history. So you can introduce cultures, and then you can introduce transient cultures that are within the cultures and move through the cultures or move between the cultures. And both of them will build a more strong universe and give you more flexibility in what you have the players do, what you have your characters do, because there's someone else to give them input or hire them or whatever.
Or drop in that item which would not have come into the hands of somebody in your base culture. It might have come in the path of a traveler.
We
Might
have,
been a gift from somebody for doing a kindness.
we have 9 minutes left.
Yeah, so,
So, do any of you have any questions or specifics from your campaign you'd like to discuss at this point, rather than listening to us continue on with whatever we're doing? Is there,
So,
yes?
we haven't really touched on it, I don't know how much, I like it, but I'm kind of getting introduced into writing lit RPGs and having like a magic system. I'll have a suggestion of how to build magic system.
so first of all, our very first session of the Writers Track this weekend was create your own magic system. It is taught it was taught by the same person who tomorrow is leading our lit RPG panel. At 4
stop
p.m.
on
Or
that.
no, that's tonight, 4 p.m. tonight is the lit RPG panel. And then, so definitely stop by my booth, because if you share your email, this is for all of you, some of you came in for this second one. If you give me your email, I will give you the links of all of those sessions that we have recorded this weekend. I promise I will not share out your email, and I will not even add you to my newsletter unless you say, please add me to your newsletter. Then I will. But definitely that. But I do want to let you guys actually answer the question too. But yeah, I want to just pass that on to you as well.
Okay, I would say there's a couple of things you want to look to. Jody, of course, emphasized consistency.
Continuity.
Within your system, it's got to be spread all about. You also need a system that will either fit in or not disrupt the culture. The more common magic, the more difficult it is to write about a culture. An occasional wizard in a castle is different from having guys that can do magic on every street corner in shops. And it will affect very much how you write and how difficult it is. And then one of the big considerations, particularly when writing, is what is the cost of doing magic? Do you need components? You only have, in D&D we do it by limiting the number of spells you can cast in a day. This is a reflection of exhaustion from performing magic. You only have so much magic strength, so much mana, whatever you want to call it. And then it stops. And the original thought was, well, originally came from Spring to Camp and Fritz Lieber's magic systems, to be honest.
You need to think of what you need your magic to accomplish in your world. Who has it? Who can get it? What they need to do it. And yeah, there's a physics of magic. Yes, there's a physics of science. The physics of magic needs to be laid out. We know a lot about the physics of science, but only you know how your magic system is intended to work. What do they need to achieve in order to make this happen? Daughter of the Bright Moon by Lynn Abbey, her character needed to sacrifice a drop of blood for every spell. And the spells were only so big. So you need to figure out what you want to accomplish with any spell. Perhaps that drop of blood can create an enormous spell. And maybe just words for small things like cantrips. But what do you want to accomplish with it? What limitations do you want to put on your characters so that they can't just solve their problems with magic?
Stop thinking of it as magic and start thinking of it as a plot device, and then make sure the plot device doesn't interfere with your story.
If it's too easy, you don't have a plot anymore. Conflict drives story.
If it's too difficult, you spend the whole book talking about accomplishing a couple of spells, then it's a dull book. So you've got to not make it the center of your story, you've got to make it the plot device that makes your story move ahead.
Just like science fiction in the 1950s, where the whole process was the story. We are going to grow crops on this barren world, and we have to do this. And the very, very last drop of blood, the very last drop of oxygen, had to go into the plot of vegetables to make it grow, or it wouldn't happen. And there wasn't a lot of characterization. The same thing goes for having to work for a spell, to work for accomplishing something in a magical way. If you make that the entire story, that's wonderful. But if your characters are going along their way and magic is just one of the tools they have, what is it taking the place of? What use is it? The Lord Darcy books by Randall Garrett, which was Robert Silverberg and Randall Merrill. Magic took the place of a lot of technological things that we take for granted. Refrigerators were magic. So in the Victorian era, the preservator ran on magical spells instead of on electricity. So what is it taking the place of? Is it technology? Is it wisdom?
Medicine.
Medicine, definitely. What do you need to accomplish with this? What is the magic taking place?
Another
Probably have
question?
time for only one more question. Okay, so like I said, if you guys want these, feel free to stop and visit me in the vendor hall on the very first booth. It's the Working Writers Mastermind booth, right to the right. See, I got a poster and I'm on it. Today I actually have somebody else working the booth, but if you can include emails with her too, and I will make sure you get the links to all these videos. And tell Gary how much you love having the writer's track, because we love bringing it to you. Bill, Jody, you guys are just rock stars. Thank you so much. Thank you guys.
Okay, a few words from us. First, plugs. One, Jody and I are both involved with writing awards and contests and things, and she'll tell you about hers. I'm one of the people who creates and works with the Dragon Award. DragonCon.org/award. Everybody can vote, costs nothing, don't have to come to the con. Nominate your favorite novels, go up and tell everybody, go vote for my, it's a People's Choice Award. So we encourage people to tell other people to vote for their book and go on. Okay? It's not rule, it's a People's Choice. All right? Second of all, I'm running one of the murder dungeons, one of the guy decks. At 1 o'clock at the end of the corridor there. When we kill a character off, replace him with another player. And I'm going to kill a lot of characters off. There's 3 pocket places in one of them.
So come
You're a
die.
statue, you're dead. So if you stick your head down there, within 20 minutes, you'll probably be playing an elf. And Jody, you have a contest.
Yes, I am the coordinating judge of the Writers of the Future contest. And this card shows you the QR code for the rules. You can enter 4 times a year. Anyone can enter a story.
Short story.
Short story, anywhere from flash fiction up to 17,000 words. The prizes are really nice. You can enter 4 times a year. On the back is a free writer's workshop that actually
Online.
has, may I do this? Videos and articles by a number of people who you may have heard, such as Larry Niven and Tim Powers, and of course it's about Carr and me, talking about the various facets of writing. So free, you don't have to sign up for anything. And the contest is a really cool thing. There's great prizes. You get your story illustrated, you get flown to Hollywood, you are one of the 12 winners a year, and you get paid, you get an enormous fuss made about you. But what it does also is to provide you with a peer group of people who have won the contest so that you get to know each other, and a boost to your career that no other short story will possibly accomplish. It just doesn't happen. So I have a bunch of cards. Past winners include Brandon Sanderson, Patrick Rothfuss, Nettie Ografor, Dean Wesley Smith, Eric Flint, Nina Griffey Hoffman, many other people who are, by the way, pro judges in the contest, but also a lot of people who are writing today whose books you love. So jump on in. I mean, it doesn't cost anything. You can take a crack at it. I have a few cards here.
Thank you guys so much.
And thank you all for being here.
Yeah, I do.
Bill,
Share this
if I may,
ideas.
I want to pause my something and see what your thoughts are. You're talking about Wanda. Wanda made the wrong decision.
Sorry, can I